It was 11:51 p.m. I was 40 stories up in my downtown Chicago office, finalizing the red lines on a $1.2 billion acquisition. The city below was quiet. My focus was absolute. Then my phone rang. It was Matthew.
He didn't call to check in.
He didn't call to see if I was coming home. He said, "Katherine, I'm taking you off the list for the Christmas Eve gala." I stared at the speakerphone, my pen hovering over the signature line. "Excuse me?" He sighed, a sound thick with unearned confidence. "Look, you're just too intense. You bring this heavy audit energy to parties, and it ruins the vibe. I've invited some actual players this year, Katherine. Successful people. High-status friends. You wouldn't fit in. Honestly, I'm doing you a favor. You can stay home and work. It's the only thing you really care about anyway." Then, without waiting for a response, he hung up. Before we see how Katherine handles this, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I want to see who's awake with us. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't call my mother to ask why my own brother would treat me like a shameful secret. That's what the old Katherine would have done. The sister. But the sister had just been evicted from the family. The senior partner remained. I sat there in the silence of my office. The hum of the server room, the only sound. Clarity washed over me, cold and sharp as a scalpel. I opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the standard family photo albums and social media feeds. I didn't want memories. I wanted data. I logged into the AlphaStream Ledger, my firm's secure internal database. Two-factor authentication. Retinal scan. Access granted. I typed in 3 words. Logitech Solutions. Matthew's boutique logistics firm. The one he bragged about at every Sunday dinner. The one he claimed was disrupting the supply chain. The screen populated with rows of red numbers. Liabilities. Outstanding loans. Operational deficits. And there, at the bottom, the creditor list. My firm had acquired his primary debt package 3 weeks ago. I hadn't mentioned it because it was just another asset in a portfolio of thousands. But now, staring at the glowing screen, it wasn't just data. It was leverage. I owned 60% of his operational debt. I wasn't just his sister. I was the institution that kept his lights on. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. Why did he do it? Why uninvite the only person in the family who actually understood the language of business? He said I ruined the vibe. He said I was too intense. But looking at his balance sheet, I realized it wasn't about vibes. It was about survival. There's a concept in psychology called narcissistic injury. It happens when a person's inflated self-image is threatened by reality. Matthew built his entire identity on being the successful one. The golden boy. The provider. But deep down, he knows it's a lie. He knows the math doesn't add up. When I walk into a room, I don't just bring audit energy. I bring the truth. My very existence is a mirror he can't bear to look into. My success reminds him of his mediocrity. My competence highlights his fraudulence. He didn't uninvite me because I don't fit in with successful people. He uninvited me because I am the only actual successful person he knows, and standing next to me makes him feel small. He had to remove the threat to maintain the delusion. I scrolled back through my personal bank records. The history of my invisible support laid out like an indictment. 4 years ago, when he started the company, the family praised his vision. They didn't know I quietly co-signed the high-risk capital loans because his credit score was trash. 2 years ago, when he leased the luxury sedan to look the part, I covered the down payment. I told him to call it a birthday gift. I told him I believed in him. I had been the silent investor in his version of family. I had subsidized his ego with my own money, buying peace, buying a seat at a table where I wasn't even respected. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. And Matthew was a liability I could no longer afford to carry. He thought he was cutting off a buzzkill. He thought he was trimming the fat from his guest list. He had no idea he had just severed the artery that kept his financial life alive. I looked at the clock. 12:03 a.m. The retaliation began now. The next morning, my phone didn't just buzz. It vibrated with the relentless frequency of a construction drill. I picked it up, coffee in hand, expecting a crisis at the London office. Instead, I found a digital parade. The family group chat was alive with photos of the gala preparations. Crystal flutes being polished. A catering van unloading trays of canapes. And there was my mother, Susan, texting with a kind of passive-aggressive sweetness that only a mother can master. "We'll miss you, honey, but maybe Matthew is right. You need to rest. You work too much." I didn't respond. I just swiped. Then I saw it. Matthew had posted a photo on Instagram. It was a wide shot of the new estate, a sprawling, modern glass house on the North Shore that hadn't even closed escrow yet. The caption read, "Built by grind. Self-made. Empire." I stared at the screen. Self-made. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with irony. He was standing on a foundation I had poured, claiming he laid every brick himself. He was celebrating an empire that was entirely leveraged on my signature. That was the tipping point. It wasn't the exclusion that broke me. It was the erasure. He wasn't just pushing me out of the family. He was rewriting history to make himself the hero of a story I had ghost-written with my own bank account. I set my coffee down. The steam rose in a thin, gray line against the window. I didn't reply to the group chat. I didn't like the photo. I didn't call my sister Lauren to vent. I went into professional mode. I called my executive assistant, Sarah. She answered on the first ring. "Good morning, Katherine." "Good morning, Sarah. I need you to initiate a full compliance audit on the Logitech Solutions account immediately." There was a pause on the line. Sarah knew who owned Logitech. She knew it was my brother. "Is there a specific concern, Katherine?" "Yes. Asset verification. I want a forensic review of all Q4 expenditures against their projected solvency metrics." "And Sarah?" "Send a calendar invite to Matthew for December 26th, 8 a.m. Location? The Glass Boardroom. 50th floor. Subject? Q4 performance and asset review." I hung up. The shift was complete. I wasn't the hurt sister anymore. I wasn't the glorified accountant they joked about at Thanksgiving. I was the senior managing partner of the firm that owned his future. Christmas Eve arrived with a biting wind off Lake Michigan. I spent the evening alone in my penthouse. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the noise I knew was filling Matthew's rented hall. I poured a glass of water and opened 2 monitors. On the left, the social media feed of the gala. On the right, the expense reports from his company's internal server. I watched the party unfold in real time. There was the Champagne Tower Dom Perignon, vintage 2008. I checked the ledger. Expense category, client development. Cost, $12,000. There was the hired staff, white gloves, tuxedos. Expense category, operational staffing. Cost, $8,000. He was live streaming his own embezzlement. He was funding a personal party with corporate funds, justified as business expenses because he assumed his end-of-year performance bonus would cover it. He was spending money he didn't have, banking on a bonus he hadn't earned yet. He was betting the house, literally, on a solvency target he had missed by 40%. I watched him raise a glass and a toast, surrounded by people who didn't know his net worth was negative. He looked happy. He looked triumphant. He looked like a man who thought he had gotten away with it. I took a sip of water. The water was cold. My hands were steady. "Enjoy the party, Matthew," I whispered to the empty room. "It's the last one you'll ever throw." December 26th, 8 a.m. The glass boardroom on the 50th floor is designed to intimidate. It is a cage of chrome and light, offering a panoramic view of a freezing, gray Lake Michigan. The table is long enough to land a small aircraft on. I sat at the head. To my right sat Elias Thorne, the founder of Logitech. He was 72, a man built of iron and old-school industrial pragmatism. He respected 2 things, silence and solvency. Matthew possessed neither. We waited. The digital clock on the wall silently flipped to 8:02. The heavy glass doors swung open. Matthew walked in. He wasn't wearing the face of a man coming to an audit. He was wearing the face of a man coming to a networking mixer. He wore a suit that was too shiny, a watch that was too big, and a smile that was entirely too wide. He was carrying a cardboard carrier with 3 coffees. He saw me and winked. Actually winked. "Hey, Katie," he said, using the diminutive nickname I hadn't permitted since I was 12. Thanks for setting this up. I know you had to pull some strings to get me in a room with the big dogs. He set a coffee down in front of me, the gesture dripping with condescension. I got you a vanilla latte. I know you like the sweet stuff. He then turned his full attention to Elias, extending a hand. Mr. Thorne. Incredible to finally get some FaceTime. I've got some ideas for Q1 that I think are really going to disrupt the vertical. Elias didn't shake his hand. He didn't even blink. He just looked at the coffee cup in front of me, then looked back at Matthew with the kind of cold detachment usually reserved for insects. Sit down, Matthew, Elias said. His voice was gravel. Matthew faltered for a microsecond, but his ego bridged the gap. He pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table, maintaining the distance, assuming this was a negotiation between peers. So, he said, leaning back, getting comfortable. What's the agenda? I assumed we were just doing a post-holiday debrief, maybe talking about that bonus structure? I opened the folder in front of me. The sound of the paper turning was the loudest thing in the room. There is no bonus structure. Matthew, I said. My voice was level. Because there is no surplus. He laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. Come on, Katie. Don't try to talk shop. Let the men handle the financials, okay? He looked at Elias for validation, a conspiratorial grin on his face. She's intense, right? Always playing business. It's cute, but... Elias slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Matthew jumped. Stop talking, Elias growled. You are embarrassing yourself. Matthew froze. I don't understand. You thought Miss Hartwell was here as a favor? Elias asked. You thought she was here to take notes? Matthew looked at me, then back at Elias, confusion clouding his eyes. Well, yeah.
She's my sister.
She's in development or something. Elias leaned forward. Ms. Hartwell is not here because she is your sister. She is here because 3 weeks ago, her firm acquired 60% of our operational debt. She isn't a guest, Matthew. She is the chairwoman of the creditor committee. She owns the building you work in. She owns the trucks you lease. And as of right now, she owns your future. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the blood drain from Matthew's face. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was an instant, total evacuation of color. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in his life. He didn't see the sister, who ruined the vibe. He saw the predator who had been sitting in the tall grass, waiting for him to make a move. You own the debt? He whispered. I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. I simply tapped the screen of my laptop, projecting the Q4 balance sheet onto the smart glass wall behind me. Red numbers illuminated the room, casting a bloody glow over his pale face. We're not here to network, Matthew, I said. We're here to discuss the $350,000 you spent on a house you can't afford, using a bonus that doesn't exist. I slid a black folder across the table. It moved over the glass surface with a quiet, lethal hiss, stopping exactly at the edge of Matthew's hands. He stared at it like it was a loaded weapon. Open it, I said. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside wasn't a termination notice. It was a single sheet of paper. A waiver. This is the waiver for the performance bonus you allocated to yourself on December 1st, I explained, my voice devoid of any familial warmth. You signed off on a $350,000 payout based on projected Q4 earnings. You used that money to put a down payment on the North Shore estate. You used it to lease the car you drove here. You used it to pay for the champagne tower I watched on Instagram 2 nights ago. I tapped the screen again. The projection shifted to a graph that was nosediving. But here is the reality, Matthew. The bonus structure clearly states that payouts are contingent on maintaining a liquidity ratio of 1.5. Your ratio is 0.8. You didn't earn that bonus. The money didn't exist. By transferring corporate funds to your personal accounts before the audit was complete, you didn't just make a clerical error. You committed corporate embezzlement. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Embezzlement. It wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was a felony. Matthew looked at Elias, his eyes wide and wet with panic. Mr. Thorne, the projections were solid. I thought the money was there. I borrowed against the future. Elias didn't even look at him. He looked at me. It's your call, Madam Chairwoman. Do we call the authorities or do we handle this internally? This was the moment. The kill shot. I could end him right now. I could have him escorted out by security, stripped of his title, and facing an indictment by lunchtime. It would be easy.
It would be satisfying.
It would be exactly what he deserved for every time he dismissed me, every time he minimized my career, every time he chose his ego over my dignity. But as I looked at him, this sweating, terrified man in a suit he couldn't afford, I didn't feel a rush of joy. I felt a heavy, exhausting weight settle in my chest. People always talk about taking the high road like it's this beautiful, scenic route where you get to feel superior and benevolent. It isn't. The high road is a lonely, freezing place. It's a burden. When you hold the power, you also hold the responsibility to be the only adult in the room. It means swallowing the scream that wants to tear them apart and instead doing the hard, thankless work of fixing the mess they made. It means you don't get the luxury of an emotional outburst. You have to be the structure. You have to be the wall that stands firm while everyone else throws themselves against it. Destroying him would be a release. Saving him, by punishing him correctly, was work. And I was the only one strong enough to do the work. I won't be calling the police, Matthew, I said. He let out a breath that sounded like a sob.
Oh, God. Katie, thank you.
I knew you wouldn't. I held up a hand. He stopped instantly. I'm not calling the police because that would bankrupt the company, and I have a fiduciary duty to protect my investment. But make no mistake. You are not walking out of here free. I pointed to the folder. That waiver? It's not for you to sign. It's a declaration of debt. You spent $350,000 of company money. That money has to be replaced. I can't replace it, he stammered. I spent it. The party, the down payment, it's gone. I don't have that kind of cash. I know you don't, I said coldly. Which brings us to the golden handcuffs. I leaned forward, invading his space for the first time. You think you're going to get fired? You think you're going to walk away, file for personal bankruptcy, and start over with some other poor company?
No.
That would be too easy. You are going to stay right here. You're going to keep your job as VP of Sales. You are going to work harder than you have ever worked in your life. And for the next 3 years, every single cent of your salary, your commissions, and your bonuses will be garnished until that $350,000 is paid back in full with interest. He stared at me, the horror dawning on him. You're making me work for free? I'm making you work for your freedom, I corrected. You wanted to be a big shot, Matthew? You wanted to play with the adults? Fine. Welcome to the big leagues. In this room, we pay our debts. He looked at the door, then back at me. He realized the trap. He couldn't quit. If he quit, I'd file the police report. He was trapped in a prison of his own making, and I was the warden holding the keys. You can't be serious, he whispered. The arrogance that had walked into the room 10 minutes ago was gone, replaced by the raw, shaking desperation of a man watching his life disintegrate. I can't work for free. I have a mortgage. I have the lease on the Rover. I have Lauren to support. We just found out she's pregnant. He threw that last part out like a grenade, hoping the blast radius would crack my resolve. Pregnant. A new niece or nephew entering a house built on stolen money. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer congratulations. I simply updated the risk assessment in my head. A child meant higher expenses. It meant he was even more desperate than I thought. It meant he was dangerous. Then you should have thought about that before you embezzled $350,000 to throw a party, I said. My voice was as flat as the glass table between us. He stood up, pacing the length of the boardroom, his hands pulling at his hair. This isn't business, Katherine. This is fratricide. You're killing me. You're destroying my life over a party invite? Is that what this is? Because I hurt your feelings? He stopped, turning to face me, his eyes wet and red. He played the card I knew was coming. The only card he had left. Think about Mom, he pleaded. Think about Dad. If this comes out, if I lose the house, if I go to jail, it will destroy them. Mom is so proud of this house. She's so proud of me. If you do this, you aren't just hurting me. You're breaking her heart. You're tearing the family apart. There it was. The shield he had used his entire life. The weaponization of our parents' happiness to excuse his own incompetence. He was holding our mother hostage, daring me to pull the trigger. I looked at Elias. He was watching me, judging not my cruelty, but my resolve. This was the test. Could I separate the asset from the bloodline? I stood up. I walked over to the window, looking out at the gray expanse of the city. You're right, Matthew, I said, my back to him. Mom would be devastated. She prefers the lie. She prefers the version of you that is successful and generous. She prefers the version of me that is quiet and supportive. I turned around. But I am done subsidizing her delusions. I walked back to the table and tapped the folder. You have a choice. Option A. You walk out that door. I file the police report for corporate theft. You go to prison for minimum 5 years. The house is seized by the feds. Lauren finds out you're a criminal. Mom finds out her golden boy is a fraud. Matthew made a choked sound in his throat. Option B, I continued. You sign this document. You accept the restricted income plan. We garnish 80% of your salary for the next 3 years. You surrender the bonus. You unwind the escrow on the house immediately. Blame it on the market, blame it on interest rates, I don't care what lie you tell them. You return the car. You live on a junior associate stipend until every single dollar you stole is repaid with interest. He stared at the paper. 80%? I can't live on that. That's poverty wages. It's the wage you earned, I countered. It's the wage that matches your actual performance, minus the theft. You wanted to be a big man, Matthew? You wanted to be the provider? Then provide. Provide the labor to fix your own mess. He slumped into the chair, defeated. He looked small. The suit didn't fit him anymore. The watch looked like a toy.
Why?
He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why are you doing this? You could just write it off. You have billions. This is nothing to you. I leaned in close, so close I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. Because you were right, Matthew. I am intense. I do bring a certain energy to the room. I waited until he met my eyes. You uninvited me from your life because you said I ruined the vibe. You said I didn't fit in with your success. Well, look around you. I gestured to the glass walls, the skyline, the empire that I helped build. I am the vibe. I am the success. And now, I am ruining your solvency.
He picked up the pen.
His hand shook so badly the tip scratched against the paper before he could even write. He looked at me one last time, searching for sister, searching for the girl who used to do his homework. She wasn't there. Only the chairwoman remained. He signed. The ink was dark and permanent. He pushed the folder back to me. It was done. He had kept his job, but he had lost his freedom. He was no longer the master of his universe. He was an employee of mine, indentured by his own ego. Elias stood up, buttoning his jacket. Efficient, he muttered, nodding at me. Matthew stood up, looking like a ghost. Can I go? Yes, I said. Get back to work. You have a lot of debt to pay off. He walked to the door. He didn't look back. He walked out into the hallway, into a life that was going to be significantly smaller, significantly quieter, and for the first time in years, honest. I watched the door close. The silence returned to the room. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like joy. It felt like a ledger balancing out. Zero sum. The fallout wasn't an explosion. It was a controlled demolition. The house fell out of escrow 48 hours later. Not because I called the bank, but because the down payment funds were frozen by the internal audit. The sellers, impatient and spooked by the financial irregularity, pulled the contract. The glass house on the North Shore remained empty, a monument to a life Matthew tried to buy with counterfeit currency. The Range Rover was repossessed the following Tuesday. Since the lease payments were tied to a corporate account that was now restricted, the dealership simply came and took it back. I heard from Lauren that Matthew watched from the window as the tow truck driver hooked it up, unable to do anything but stand there and let it happen. Then came the call I expected. My mother, Susan.
She didn't call to ask for my side.
She called to scream. How could you? She demanded, her voice cracking with the specific hysteria of a parent whose golden child has been tarnished. He's your brother, Katherine. You've ruined him. He's working for pennies. He lost the house. Lauren is pregnant, and they're stuck in that apartment because of you. You have billions. Why couldn't you just let it go? Why do you have to be so cruel? I sat in my office, the phone on speaker, watching the city lights flicker on below me. I didn't feel the old sting of rejection. I didn't feel the need to justify my existence or apologize for my competence. I didn't take his money, Mom, I said calmly. I just stopped letting him steal mine. That's not true. He was going to pay it back. No, he wasn't. And you know it. You just preferred the version of the story where he's the successful provider and I'm the cold, distant spinster. You liked the lie because it made you feel good. But the bill came due. And I'm the one collecting. She sobbed. You've destroyed this family. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. I didn't destroy it, I said. I just audited it. I hung up. I blocked the number. I didn't need to hear the rest. I sat there in the silence of my office. It was late. The cleaning crew had already come and gone. Most people find empty offices depressing, symbols of a life traded for labor. But tonight, this room felt like a sanctuary. For years, I had looked at Matthew and felt a pang of envy. Not for him, but for the applause he received. The way he walked into a room and demanded attention. The way the family orbited around his noise and his flash. I thought I was missing something. I thought I was doing it wrong. But tonight, looking out at the skyline I helped shape, I realized the fundamental error in my thinking. I had been confusing status with power. There is a profound difference between the two. Status is what Matthew had. It is the loud party, the leased luxury car, the Instagram caption claiming you are self-made. Status is a performance. It relies entirely on the audience's belief. It is fragile because it requires constant maintenance, constant noise, and constant validation. It is an illusion of importance that shatters the moment the credit card is declined. Power is different. Power is physics. It is the ability to determine the outcome. It doesn't need a vibe. It doesn't need to be the life of the party. It doesn't need applause. Power is the quiet certainty that you can walk into a room, say nothing, and still change the temperature. It is the silence of the person holding the pen. Matthew chased status because he felt empty. I built power because I wanted control. He wanted to look rich. I wanted to be undeniable. He had the noise. I had the quiet empire. I closed my laptop. The screen went black. I picked up my bag and walked to the elevator. I was going home to an empty apartment, to a silent phone, to a life without the chaotic, draining drama of a family that never understood me. And for the first time in 34 years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clean. Script completed. Have you ever had to be the villain in someone else's story just to save yourself? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice.